Stand by for a second. Okay, we're live.
All right, I'll call us to order at 5:02. Do we have any modifications or additions to the agenda?
President Everett, none from staff.
All right, public comment?
The only public comment received was included in your packet.
Okay. And then the consent agenda. Does anybody want to move anything off the consent agenda? Or can I get a motion to approve?
I move approval of the consent agenda.
I can second that.
All right, moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Meriwether.
Meriwether, Chapman,
Shepherd, aye.
Strike aye.
Everett, aye, passes. Informational reports. Everybody's read them and is satisfied? Then we'll move on to presentation and discussion. First up would be the bridge replacement volunteer agreement.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner. This is an item that is in front of the commission based on discussions over the last couple of months about finding the right way to engage volunteers in the community that have technical expertise and interest in participating and providing their knowledge to the board. And I think it's a good opportunity just to find out from the commission kind of what they're looking at just generally with the use of volunteers. And I realize that every situation is kind of a case-by-case scenario. But I am really, I want to encourage volunteers to be part of the project and find good, positive ways to incorporate people in the community to be actively engaged in the project. So the document that's in your packet today was reviewed by Jerry and our insurance provider. And so I think that in some ways this is a little bit threatening if you're a volunteer wanting to be involved, to have a document put in front of you. It's like, oh, what does this really mean? But I think having a discussion about how to adequately tap into experts in our community in a way that can be beneficial for the project long term is really important. And whether it's a formal agreement or a less formal arrangement, I think it would be helpful for me to have that direction from the commission as to how we should be engaging volunteers. So I don't know if you had a chance to review it or if you have any thoughts about the agreement. I'd be just interested in taking some notes and listening to the conversation.
And if anybody wants me to share that page in the packet or anything the rest of the meeting, please just let me know.
Well, I'll dive in and start because I've been kind of the one pushing this charge forward to get some people who want to help, the ability to help us. I did have a conversation with Mr. Fox, and the start of the conversation, he was concerned about the document. He was concerned about what it meant for his ability to effectively communicate with the people that he wants to be able to communicate with. And then through our discussion, we kind of rounded out and ended up at a slightly different place. And so I'd like to we could definitely talk about this document, but what he and I kind of landed on was maybe instead of having a volunteer agreement, we actually let Mr. Fox come and give a presentation to the commission for a different approach into looking at this, that number one, protects the poor, and number two, protects him in this specific scenario, but it could also then be put into place for other projects and other documents with other professional volunteers. So that's he kind of went through his ideas with me, and I would, I guess, like to ask the commission if we could allow Mr. Fox to come in and give his presentation, because I think maybe the path that he's talking on going on is a little bit different, and I think it might be a good one to listen to.
Okay,
Commissioner Chapman, if I can ask you, so you're thinking it'd be in terms of just a single presentation as opposed to an ongoing, I guess, relationship or whatever?
Well, I think what he would like to do is give a single presentation that could outline an ongoing relationship in a slightly different manner, where he would basically almost be considered a consultant and his fee is just, $1. And he was thinking that for Jerry, it might be a little bit cleaner to almost have a contract with laid out expectations, and he actually kind of went through what he felt the expectations could be. But like I said, he would like to come to the commission. I mean, I have the document that he sent to me, but he would like to present it to the commission for consideration, I guess, for a longer term, almost like I wouldn't call it a project management committee. It's almost like a technical advisory committee.
I guess my thinking on that is if there is going to be some sort of a committee like that's a different story or a different approach than an individual consulting, basically. And I don't necessarily have a problem with forming some sort of a committee that would advise. I'm not sure it would be us. Maybe it should advise the bi-state working group.
Well, and I think that was one of the things that he talked about is, for now, he would be, the technical advisory committee would kind of be reporting to us, but we would be swiftly shifting it over to the bi-state group as that forms better.
I'd like to hear what the other commissioners think. I like the idea of forming some sort of an advisory group better than having an individual that reports to the commission that is sort of outside of the process that we've established. I think that can be really be complicated and can muddle things up somewhat. I had a conversation with Chair Everett about this. I know a couple of other people that have extensive knowledge and history in working with bridges that are here in this community, and I think that they would be valuable assets too. I don't think they should be operating outside the system, if you will, or outside the process, if you will, and reporting directly to the commission. Those people may not agree on approaches, and then we would be hearing possibly sort of a staff presentation, and then maybe 2, 3, 5 other individuals coming to us. I think that could be a difficult thing to work through, but I'd be interested to hear what the other commissioners think about Mr. Fox being able to come and speak to the commission and going from there. To me, that's sort of an expanded version of the comments from the public that we do at the start of our meetings. I'd leave it to the chair to decide, we should make an exception for him in this situation, that sort of thing, or hear what the other commissioners think about that prospect. Thank you.
Well, and I think that the idea behind it is this could be something that we can utilize for other projects, because it would set the template of how we form these, because we do have so many talented professionals who are either retired or have esteemed careers in a lot of, they just come to the Gorge because they love it here. And it would be great for us to have a mechanism to be able to tap into some of this professional talent in a consistent manner.
Chrissy, Commissioner Strike, we brought in an individual to be our point person as the bridge representative. And I'm wondering, is Mr. Fox feeling that that person is not conveying information properly or accurately to the board? Is that why he wants to confront the board and have a one-on-one? Because it seems to me that we have a project manager to be Kevin. He would be the one working with volunteers. And if there's a bridge that is not being made, and accuracy and whatever it may be, is that the case?
I think that Mr. Fox has a great deal of respect for Kevin and a lot of the staff that he's interacted with. I think what he is interested in looking for is to have a mechanism that allows him to voice his opinions and know that those opinions will then be shared with the commission. So I don't think that necessarily he has anything that he doesn't think that is being presented to us. It's kind of like the presentation that he sent to me. He discussed it with Kevin and asked for it to be brought to the commission. And I understand where Kevin's coming from, in the sense that we don't have a mechanism in place to bring forth this type of information from just the general public. And so he thinks that by creating this, he thinks that by him being able to give a presentation of his idea of how he thinks we could formulate some sort of a technical advisory committee, then that fixes the issue. Because as it stands, some person comes in and hands Kevin some documents and says, I want them presented in front of the commission. I definitely understand Michael's perspective and John's perspective of we don't necessarily want any single member of the community to be able to hand information and expect it to get in front of the commission, when maybe it should be a staff thing.
Yeah, and I agree with that, our staff has, a meaningful function in being a filter for the information that comes before us. And, that's the reason we have staff, or at least it's a function that we trust staff to do. And particularly in the case of the bridge, that we have Kevin, we have 3 lobbyists, we have Lowell Clary, we have Steve Siegel, who are all in the employ of the port right now. And that's a lot of input coming our way that is, I don't know that a volunteer without access or to that information could give meaningful advice. So for the kind of what input that, at least what I'm hearing, Mike wants to make, he'd have to be in that loop of information to be informed enough to make meaningful opinion, which means we have hired another consultant. Volunteer is an at-will position. So, and I think Mike is free to give public comment at every meeting. He definitely has your ear, Christy, and you believe that his approach is, has value. I think having a commissioner with that view is enough to put it on the agenda for a presentation. I don't know that it's enough, in my view at least, to disrupt or upend the efforts that are in place and of long duration. You know, Steve Siegel has been working on this for, I don't know, years at one level or another. And to change course at this point in the process, we seriously lose ground. So that's a heavy decision to make. That's it. This is my 2 cents at this point.
All right, I'll be the last one to weigh in on this one. I hear a lot of hesitancy, or I feel like I'm hearing a lot of hesitancy in using experts, or you know, we have a member of the, and a lot of this discussion is about Mr. Fox, who I have had no conversations with on this particular matter, but I sense a lot of hesitancy in using experts when I read this volunteer document, which reads as a real curtailment of volunteers. And if I was an expert with that much experience, I would tell you to shove it. If I read that, I would never sign that. I don't understand the hesitancy in this. We need to use people that have this kind of experience. If Commissioner Merriweather has other ideas, wow, should we be using them if they're in our community and have the willingness and the ability to help us out? Because a lot of these people know way more than anybody on this call about this kind of project. So I don't understand the hesitancy that I read and that I hear in using volunteers. And I think it's a poor route to be taking. So I disagree with the document. I think that's absolutely not something I would ever agree to as a volunteer. I also would like, and I am in favor of Mr. Fox, if he has a valuable presentation to give, I am in favor of hearing it. I don't know why in the world I wouldn't be. If we want to discuss a committee of some kind, I think that's a larger discussion that we should have. And perhaps that's for the 5 of us to talk about in a different format, but that is a different discussion, I would agree. And another discussion that we need to have is who is directing the construction of this? Is it going to be the bi-state committee? Is that the director? Is it an individual? If I was Kevin, I'd be asking this question. Read his job description. Not one word in there gives him authority to do anything or says he's doing anything after the moment the FEIS is done. Not one word. So I'm wondering, what are we doing? Who is the director that apparently any volunteer has to filter everything through if they're to get information to us? Who is it? I mean, these are my questions. And so a couple of different things. I would like to talk about that because that's an answer that I need to know. And maybe we just don't know yet what that entity is going to be or who that person is going to be. But I think we need to know that before we say any volunteer is going to have to be filtered through who. So a lot of questions need to be answered.
If I could respond, not as the chair, but as on the member of the bi-state work group committee. That is, Chrissy, in my understanding, Mike's experiences with construction, engineering, construction, actual projects in hand, go build something. And your point, Ben, is well made, that we're not building a bridge yet. The function of the bi-state work group is to try and forge a political coalition on both sides of the river and affect legislative language in the Washington side that even allows this bi-state authority to exist, and then get a bi-state authority that would actually manage the front end of arranging funding, financing, contracting for the bridge. At that point in time, I think the TAC committee, if I understand it, or a person like Mr. Fox could have real meaningful impact. What we're doing right now is an exercise in government that there's no expertise there. Kevin is particularly suited to the, the work as evidenced by the successful environmental impact statement and the NEPA process. That's very much more the wheelhouse, to use your word, Krista, that we're in right now, and will be in for at least another year. So who that person is driving the bridge construction.
If I could jump in for just a sec. I mean, I want to make it real clear, I'm not an engineer. I'm not even an environmental planner. And so it's, the port has owner's representation for each of these steps of the way to look in and manage the overriding contract. So WSP is our environmental consultant, and OTAC is providing that technical owner's representation review for the technical aspects. I anticipate as we go through the AE design process that there will be a need to have an owner's rep with that specific skill set to ask those questions of the AE design firm and communicate those back to the commission. That's not necessarily my role or this position's role, because I'm not an engineer or environmental planner. So there is another role moving forward for that owner's representation.
Organization, coordination, making phone calls, having lobbyists teed up, taking that level of information back to both our group and the Bi-State Working Group. That's very much the middle of Kevin's NEPA experience that we can leverage right now on the HB 2017 money. That money's going to run out when, Kevin?
This coming year, probably around the third, fourth quarter.
Okay, so next year. And then we'll face the decision, Ben. Where do we lose Kevin, or do we go to the build grant, 5 million plus the 1.25 match from us? So the 6.25 million. I guess that grant technically went to the Port of Hood River or the Port of Klickitat?
Port of Hood River.
So we'll make that decision, whether to continue to employ Kevin out of that budget or not.
Well, my point as far as I was concerned is anything outside FEIS, if you want to hire Kevin to do it, you should probably write it down, because it has not been.
Exactly. I totally agree.
That it doesn't exist. So right now, Kevin's operating outside his authority. So that's a discussion we need to have. And I'm not trying to speak for Kevin, but I sure as heck would want to know if I was in that position. So
I'm at will employee. I'll work for you as long as you'd like.
You're at will. Yeah, I agree. But we're 6 months from there. That bridge is coming. It's going to have to be crossed, but it's not today.
Well, I think that what I'm asking the commission is, I agree that the timeline is a little further out before we're looking at the design build contracts, but in Mr. Fox's opinion, there's things that can be being done now that can tee us up for better success. So when we get to that point, we're ready to hit the ground running. And I guess all that, and I'll stop talking here, but I just would like to know from the commission, he gave the presentation to me in my head. It all made a lot of sense. I would not do the service of trying to explain his presentation to me to all of you. I would botch it up and I would misrepresent stuff because anyways, but so I'm just asking the commission, if we are looking at something that may be months down the road, why wouldn't we look at the next meeting, allowing Mr. Fox to give, I think we were on the phone for 20 minutes, give a short presentation on where he feels not that we would pivot from what we're doing, but in at the same time, look at some options that we have to move forward using his expertise a little bit more in a more structured environment, and more so maybe then how we could use this whatever you want to call it, this advisory template in the future for other projects that we might be able to do.
I think that I've heard consensus that we're willing to listen. You know, frankly, I would put Mike on the agenda based on your view that you have had meaningful discussion and you think it's valuable. You are a commissioner. I think you have that, certainly the right to bring it up. Hearing from Mike in a presentation as a private citizen, I can easily see that as what are these things that we can do? I'd like to, because we are doing quite a lot. I know, and we did that Zoom conversation, you and I, Mike and Kevin, that my technology failed through half of it. But, you know, one of the things he suggested was that we have, I forget what the contract structure document that allowed us to do a piece of the work and then get out if we needed to. That very thing was suggested by Lowell Clary at the last bi-state work group. One other thing that Mike suggested was that when we set up our consulting contract, we do it at 100% so that we didn't have to go back to get another consultant on board for every phase of the project and have the inefficiencies of pass off right through. Another recommendation Lowell Clary made to the bi-state working group at the last meeting. So, you know, we're getting similar information, at least in those two instances, both from the consultants we have hired and are paying, and from Mike Fox.
And I would say, you know, and Chuck Green, who's developing the RFP, the bid process for the AE design contract, we've met with Mike, and and we incorporated a lot of what Mike had to say, and I think it was a real positive experience. And so I think it's good. You know, I guess the job that I have is to make sure that the commission's fully seeing that, how those are being incorporated into the final product.
Okay, well, I know that this is a discussion on the volunteer agreement. So besides the ask, I will say that, you know, after talking to Mr. Fox, I think that if this is the document that we present to him, if it was me, I wouldn't sign it. So I'm not okay with moving forward with this particular document. I'd like to wait and hear if you guys are amenable to listen. And then I think we can figure out something that's more win-win for everyone.
Mr. Commissioner Strike, you know, I have faith in Christy Chapman as far as her decision and her interpretation of Mike Fox's input. Make a suggestion that we just put the volunteer agreement on hold for right now and listen to Mr. Fox in the open session, and maybe he can add some information in regard to his concerns about this document, and we can incorporate those into a new rewritten document at a later time. But I'm in favor of having Mr. Fox speak to us.
Thank you, Commissioner.
I concur with that. And I think we're all in agreement at the next meeting or a future one. If that's fine. I think, yeah, the idea of going forward with this agreement right now is probably premature. We don't know if we even want to do that with regard to this project at this point. We'll sort of figure that out down the road, and whether or not we want to try to incorporate this agreement in a different way, we can figure that out as we go. But yeah, I'm fine with hearing from Mr. Fox.
Commissioner Shepard?
Yes, I agree. Thank you.
I do too. So I guess at that point, Michael, direct staff to reach out to Mr. Fox and invite him to make a presentation.
Yep, I'll reach out to him.
Okay. Then
Thank
thanks everyone. It's a thorny question.
I was just gonna say, we'll see if we can get that on the next commission meeting.
Good feedback. Thank you.
That'd be the 26th.
Okay. Then next up is the draft RFQ for fixed base operators at the airport.
Happy New Year, Commissioners.
Happy New Year.
Okay, so in your packet, you've got the draft RFQ. I just wanted to go over a couple points. One, the reasoning behind an RFQ versus an RFP. So as you understand, the RFQ would allow us a little more flexibility and allow any applicants or respondents some more flexibility in how they want to approach the FBO. There are various ways to provide FBO services, and due to the size of our airport, we may learn some things about how we could form the FBO agreement and what services we would want them to require, or that we could have other entities provide. So that's why we chose the RFQ. Secondly, I wanted to have a little bit of discussion around the current subsidy for the FBO. So it's about $20,000, which is a subsidy for services provided by the FBO. In addition to that, you have a table in your memo that shows the different real estate that's available to the FBOs. And if you look over at sort of the market rate column, that shows potentially comparable market rates for those spaces. Currently, all of these are included as part of the FBO agreement, so they do not pay for these buildings or the use of them beyond the maintenance hangar, which they pay, $500 a month. So I would like to have a little bit of discussion about that as well. And then any other items in the RFQ that you see that pop out, but I just would like to understand if this is what you were thinking or if you have any additional input.
Yeah, I kind of feel like I'm out of my depth when I look at those numbers and buildings and stuff. But I mean, what's usual and customary?
And just for clarification, Commissioner Strike, so we have an outlay of $20,000 capital outlay to the FBO operator, and then on top of that, we have a $16,200 waiver on square footage on the admin building, and then $24,000. Is that correct? So it's a total of what, $40,000, $50,000, $60,000?
Yep, and we haven't put those buildings out to market for years and years and years. So
Okay.
75 cents would probably be a little bit high, but somewhere around those are, close to market rates.
Okay. And first of all, Anna, I think this is a great idea that you've chosen to go to an RFQ. Much more simpler, much more user-friendly. I think it's a great way to get somebody interested that may not qualify for an RFP initially. Kudos to you. In a comparison to our activity at Ken Jernstad Airport, in relationship to another FBO operator, does anything stand out and that we're not doing that we could possibly do to generate revenue to offset our debt to our FBO operator?
So what I think your question is, to offset the debt to our FBO operator, you mean, are there additional revenue streams that we could offer them that would assist them in being a successful FBO?
Correct answer. We're not obligated at $20,000 and offset $60,000. It's another way that an FBO operator come in, existing or a new one coming in,
Mhm.
who can find other revenue streams that other FBOs are doing that we may not be doing, or so we're more of a supporting role than actually the role we have now, because I'd assume be revenue neutral or positive instead of being subsidized.
Mhm. Well, I mean, the only other things that we could kind of consider that maybe other airports do is some other airports, the FBO is paid to do the maintenance at the airport since they're there on a daily basis. So rather than staff from the port being allocated to the airport, that would be an FBO function as a potential revenue stream for them. Other potential revenue streams could be, T-hanger management type situation, but then you're relinquishing some more of your management control of your assets to the FBO, but in some cases that's done at a smaller airport. In addition, we just don't have a lot of operational functions that the FBO could fill beyond that. We have one small fuel tank and 34 tie downs and not a lot of hangars for them to lease out. So really we're limited in additional revenue generation.
And due to the fact that both our FBO operators in the Gorge are the same person, same entity, what is the Dow's doing different? And is their contract structured a lot different than our contract?
I haven't seen it yet. But as
I have a meeting with, I'm sorry.
They also have an airport manager who does most of the leasing. And then as I understand, their FBO provides their fueling services, very limited training. And that's about it.
Okay. I hopefully have a meeting later this week with Aaron, FBO operator up there, so airport advisor. I'll ask her if we can get a copy of that agreement with TAC Aero, if it's a public document, which I think it is.
Yes.
Also, the 40,000 gallon number we use for fuelage for a rate of payoff. Is that a realistic number that we hit every year, 40,000, or that's just number we picked out of the sky, or how do we derive it 40,000?
That's at least what we hit every year. And then some good years it will go over that.
Sure. It's attainable. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, yes.
Commissioner, could I go back to your first question or the premise of it? And clarify this if I'm incorrect, but the basic assumption in this RFQ is we're not offering up a stipend or a payment. What we are offering up is the value of the benefit of utilizing the existing FBO building, but not the maintenance hangar, not the white hangar. And so the question is, and the basis for negotiation, the starting point for negotiations would be zero payment, which would be a $20,000 savings to the port if that in fact can be negotiated. If someone can find value in the array of potential services or upgrading and increasing the cash flow of the existing services. So it could be that we get someone coming in and say, yeah, I want to be there. I've got great qualifications and I don't need any. We're not offering, but they could ask, or they could say, let's negotiate on that basis. But we don't know yet. The last time we issued an RFP for an FBO, or maybe the last two times, there's been very few respondents. And so in a way,
Mike,
go ahead.
Fred, do we have access to the books for TAC Aero at Ken Jernstead as far as the revenue stream that they generate from fuel cells and from maintenance and stuff? Do we have access to that so we can get a baseline what we're looking at? Because anybody who's going to come in and be a new FBO operator, they're going to want to look at those books, or at least have some type of a starting point and look at revenue streams that maybe potentially they could grow on and benefit from and expand on. Do we have access to those?
We don't have access to it, but I'm sure we could ask for a report, like an annual report or a quarterly report.
Because anybody going in business, they need to know that. it's existing business. We have hard numbers for existing overheads that there's some of those numbers you can't skew.
Yeah,
So it would be helpful for anybody who wants to do an RFQ or an RFP that they would have that information ahead of time and see that maybe there's potential that's not being tapped here.
yeah, I think at least through the RFQ process, whoever comes forward, and I'm sure if they want to come forward, they would come forward in that process as well. And at that point, we would probably have to have some financials.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it'd be healthy for us, Fred, as a port to have those numbers ourselves in-house. So we can look at it and go, okay, this is the revenue stream here. They're generating X amount of thousands of dollars on this. Are we utilizing, are we marketing the fuel? Are we marketing the building to the best potential? Without those numbers, you can't do that. At least I can't.
I'll have to defer to Ann, but I'm sure she could, I'd ask them, they might be willing to provide us a copy of that.
They have not been willing in the past, but as part of this RFQ, we could request that for, as Michael mentioned earlier, for the respondent that gets the highest marks.
Counselor Jerry, is that something we could put in a new, the RFP, when we award it, that we have access to the books at a confidential level? Is that something we can?
You should be able to do that.
Okay.
And Commissioner Strike,
Wise for us.
in the new FBO agreement, that is spelled out, that we would
Okay.
require an annual meeting to evaluate the financial sort of status of the FBO.
Okay, thank you.
And I have a random question. When you say other small airports, what other airports do you contact or do you use for benchmarks for us in the area?
Well, there's a number of them around. There's one in Vancouver whose name I can't remember. I talk with Bend Airport quite a bit, which is a little bit bigger than us, but similar sort of clientele. There's one up in, oh, no, I can't think of it, not Everett, but there's one up there that I've talked to in the past. And then on an annual basis before COVID, we're part of a Western Airport Managers Association that meets annually. And typically there's 50 plus airports from around the Western United States of various sizes. And there's lots of discussion and breakout sessions and whatnot about airports of your same size and the issues you all face. So I've learned a lot from those different airports and keep in contact with them. I get emails every week that are circulating around that, and I've sent some myself with questions about how things operate in similar airports to us: California, Colorado, Washington, Oregon. So there's a number of them around.
Interesting. Thank you.
Mhm.
Just a also random question, Ann, how come, is WAM have any interest in doing the FBO?
No, they don't. They have looked at it. We've talked about it. That's really not their focus or would fit in really with their mission. At least the last time I talked to them. Who knows, maybe they'll respond to this, but last year when we discussed it, that wasn't something they were interested in.
And do we do a lot of airport maintenance or airplane maintenance business out of the 4,000-foot hangar? Or does the FBO?
I don't know. There are 2 full-time mechanics there, and there's quite a bit of maintenance happening there. There's also quite a bit of maintenance that's happening on the sly in people's hangars that we have no management over. So yeah, they
People
do.
aren't allowed to work on their plane in their hangar?
No, they are not, but we know it happens and it's difficult to catch. So there's a number of things that happen on the slide that with this FBO agreement, potentially a new FBO operator has some suggestions for how to deal with this. I for sure know that there's instructors who are instructing, who are not FBO instructors, that are registered instructors. So I'm hoping we can have some solutions for that with a new FBO operator, or the same FBO operator. At least we can talk about it.
And do you know if there are many companies out there, FBOs that are that would have an interest in this, an airport this size and that sort of thing? You have any feel for responses we might get?
No, there's a few different FBO models. There's sort of your mom and pop that provide FBO services for small airports like this, which are usually made up of somebody that lives in your community or would like to locate here. And then there's FBOs that have a conglomerate of FBO agreements, in the state, region, or around the country, which is what TAC Aero provides. So, and then there's the big FBOs that we would not be attracted to at all. So there's a few FBOs similar to TAC Aero, and it's becoming more competitive, but I'm not sure that Hood River is on their radar. So we'll see.
Are you going to use the airport advisory committee to assist with the scoring, or how are you going to do that? How are you going to vet the proposals? I mean, I see the scale and all that, but who are you going to get to?
So that would be 2 commissioners, 2 executive staff, and 2 AAC members.
Thank you.
And it was Michael's idea for the RFQ, by the way.
Oh, okay, great. Good job, Mike.
Credit for you.
And fill us in, give us a detail, what's the minimum we could get away with the FBO obligations, their daily function? We're going to a self-serve fuel system, which we already have. What can we get away, the bare bones, that we can do maybe in-house? And also, this is a wild hair, but just maybe if we could incorporate Mid-Columbia College with a business degree, a model that they can work with us, that we could have people run a business and also be introduced to aviation, but that they could fill that void as a human being there, and they could get credit for it and build business sense. Is that a possibility? Because I don't think the FBO does a lot anymore. It's getting less and less. We're getting more and more self-serve fueling docks, and when you land, there's nobody there.
Yeah, I would agree with you that there's a lot of self-service, especially during COVID. And it's shown that there's certain things with an FBO that you don't need. I think the things you do need are somebody that can assist with fueling issues, who can use the truck and go out and fuel somebody who needs a truck fuel. Having flight training at any airport, I think, is important for a number of reasons, for education as well as supporting the aviation industry, which is one of our main missions at the airport, to support that branch of the transportation system here in the States. So I think training is a vital component there. Additionally, they provide some eyes at the airport. There's somebody there usually all the time. It may be somebody in the maintenance hangar doing maintenance or doing an annual for somebody, but there's eyes, and they're eyes that are trained and understand airports and how they work. And so that's not something that that we can fill at a staff level. Also, they provide maintenance, and so you have a whole suite of things that, as you expect when you fly into an airport. It's not saying that we couldn't have individual businesses provide those things, but that's a much more administratively heavy proposition than having one company that does it all, which is the standard FBO model. However, there could be things we could pick off from there, and I'm hoping an RFQ in this discussion will help us maybe look at different ways to structure this.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think COVID is going to be a good catalyst for us. It's going to show us that we don't have to have the old antiquated way of doing things in aviation. just because we've always done it. That's the way we do it. Yeah, I would like to have staff and the board kind of get behind us trying to research maybe the FBO scaling down its work ethics, or not ethics, but responsibilities. And maybe those buildings are subleased out or to a separate entity other than the FBO operator, and the FBO operator is something we could maybe do in-house with one employee we hire or working with a college or something, but we can go ahead and maybe change a different format of running an FBO differently than we have in the last 20 years. But I think COVID's going to show us that we don't need all those bodies. And also in regard to safety and eyes on the field, technology's eliminating that. Your flight tracker is much better than any human could ever be. So technology is going to allow us to have a very safe and secure operation up there, and not a human involved. Artificial intelligence much more accurate and dependable than a human. So I think when you lean that way, you find shortcuts and things you don't really actually need. We've always done it that way, but it doesn't mean we have to continue to do it that way.
And there's also other on the field entities who provide training, such as the Glider Club, you know, and like you mentioned earlier, WHAM, there may be some opportunities for them to plug in ways that we haven't thought of.
Again, way outside my wheelhouse. So I agree with everything Hobie's saying. One of the technologies we might want to look into is, coincidentally, my next door neighbor, longtime employee of In Situ, ex-military, started a company that has automated drone technology training. I'm not 100% sure, but I do know that they're reaching out to ports and bridges and dams and things for some drone technology to help with security, surveillance, and what have you. So I have no idea if our airport is on, you know, large enough for a conversation with their newer company. They've been around a little under a year, but he might be a good person to at least see, like Hobie said, what other things possibly could we outsource and automate. I'd be happy to email you his info.
Yeah, that'd be great. I'd be curious to see if they worked with airports, just because of the airspace kind of conflicts with drones and airports.
Apparently they have, so.
Great.
You know, just a suggestion, I think this is a great start. I think it's a great approach to RFQ versus RFP. And I suggest that maybe we send this out and see what we get response wise. And if we get several individuals or companies that are interested, we have a one-on-one with them and pick their brain and learn from each individual or each individual company, and then come back with an RFP. But I think it's a great start, and it's a soft start.
And is that enough direction for you, Ann, to move forward?
Yes, that's great. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. All right, then moving forward. The draft RFDI. You get to go again.
Well, this is on me.
Oh, sorry.
So this is on my work plan as commission directed staff to put together an RFI. We called it an RFDI, but that's for a little bit additional clarity. The idea here, of course, is to get a similar sort of, well, similar in some ways, but a solicitation out that indicates we have a piece of property available, or interested in hearing ideas and suggestions and indications of interest from either the business community or the development community. We're leaving it open in terms of what could be proposed. what sort of development. Obviously, it needs to be consistent with the commercial zoning, but it's fairly wide open. Could be developer, could be business. But what we are saying here is that our intention is not to sell the property, rather to ground lease it. And so we're putting certain parameters on this, and that will likely reduce the level of interest, but it, I think, is consistent with what the commission has talked about in terms of retaining our assets and trying to build some long-term cash flow. This is a request for letters of interest. It could be that we get no responses. It could be that we could get a few. The commission can then decide whether to initiate and pursue some form of preliminary negotiations with one or more, or reject them all, or something in between. So it's really a vehicle by which we can test the market and see what the level of interest is, and get an idea of what ideas people have for this small bit of property. Within it, there is a way for the staff to evaluate proposals or letters of interest that come in, and in some way rank them, so there's some way to reflect to the commission what the objective recommend or evaluation would be and what staff would recommend. There is a schedule in here that would indicate, and it's of course subject to all sorts of change, but the idea would be, if the commission likes this approach and likes the way the document is formatted and the content is, to get it out sometime late this month or early next, and give it a long gestation time. I think that in the draft here is an April 15th return date. I think that could be easily pushed out into May. So we give a long chance, opportunity for businesses or developers to look at it and respond to it. So here, we could walk through it if you'd like, or if the commission's reviewed it. This is non-binding in every sort of way, but it will give us the first indication of what the private market sees in terms of potential and opportunity at the Barman property, and the commission can evaluate them. So staff is looking for a direction to proceed, make changes, or what direction you want to take.
I went last on the last one, so I'm gonna go first on this one. I think this is great. You're correct. This is the direction that I think the commission had a consensus to move in on this particular piece of property. My question, I don't know if my question's for Michael or for other commissioners, but the one thing that there was not consensus on is how or what, as far as this property is concerned. So I want to make sure all commissioners are comfortable with the language in this document, with that in mind.
I'll jump in, Commissioner Strike. I'll jump in here. Just for the record, I was not comfortable with any of this. So last meeting, never have been, as far as a land lease or anything at all like that. But if the majority wants to move forward with this, I suggest we go into an executive session and talk numbers, so I know what I'm looking at as far as a ground lease value, and then come back out and address this for direction, because I don't know what I'm looking at. I don't know what this, and we can't do it in general session because that is a conflict. So that's my suggestion. We go into executive and find out what we think it's valued at, price per square foot at a lease rate, have a better understanding. So I know what my cash flow is going to be generated from that property, and what the market will share and hold. But right now, I don't have that information in front of me. At least I'm not seeing it. Is it there?
No.
It was to mine. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I'll pause. I just was, I could answer that question if you'd like.
Please.
So the very nature of this is to try to determine where the market's at, if there's interest or not. And so as a result, there isn't any limitation or identification of what the hurdle rate is for for a ground lease. It's first and foremost is trying to get an idea what the market sees here. Is there interest? Is there interest under a housing project or a retail project or whatever? And once we know that, then the commission has a better idea of what we're dealing with in terms of interest and therefore value. Then the idea of establishing what our lease rate would be or what our target rate would be further down the road during negotiations.
Mike, I agree with you down the road, but I just think if we compare this to Meriwether when he said about the hangars, Ann had a number per square foot for lease, and Dave goes, that doesn't make sense to have that money. That's nothing coming in. There's no revenue stream there. And it changed Dave's opinion on investment, capital investment. So I still would like to have a kind of ballpark of what we're looking at of revenue, monthly revenue stream before I move forward on this. But I can be a minority, but that's my opinion from a business standpoint.
I think the best we could do is establish a minimum to indicate to any interested party that there's a threshold, but of course the ground lease would be tied to what the proposed development is and what the anticipated cash flow off that would be. So it would be highly contingent, and therefore only thing I could suggest maybe is a floor to weed out people that think it's going to be $1 a year. I would not recommend putting that in at this request for interest stage.
And Michael, do you feel, because I know that the commission has spoken before about holding land, and I know that that's our preference, and I know that that's what we're working towards. Do you think that it's limiting to say this is a ground lease only, or should we broaden it to see what we get, to see, if there's someone that wants to have some sort of, do you understand where I'm going with this? Like maybe someone has a creative way for a win-win situation that is different than just a ground lease.
That could be. That's a good point. That could be modified to allow that. I just would urge the commission to continually think about this challenge we have long-term, to say we need to find ways to replace that. That's loud and clear. We've talked about it for years. This is our only commercial zoned opportunity, and to sell it for even $500,000 or something is a immediate bump, but long-term, it doesn't provide that long-term. So I assume that the commission wanted to stick to that principle and say, look, a public-private partnership of some sort, but we're not putting money into this. We're not putting capital into it. The asset we have to contribute is the land.
Commissioner Everett, can I ask the board, is it totally off the table that we're not going to develop it ourselves? We have the capability to develop it ourselves? Is that off the table?
The reason I asked the question, Hobie, yeah, Commissioner Strike, the reason I asked that initial question is because my answer to your question is no, it's not off the table for me. And that's
So
kind of the reason I answered the question.
But this here, we're only having basically one option. We don't want to sell it, Mike said. Okay. So then he says a land lease, but if the land lease is only a few $1,000s a month, is that going to really help us out? I need direction from Fred there. But I still want to look at developing ourselves. I think there's ways to make money and have good cash flows for 40 years. But like I said, I'm only one commissioner, but I'm a little bit set back that we're digging ourselves into a little corner here that we got one option, a ground.
Well, I guess does this pigeonhole us into like having April 15th roll around? We have one interested party. We hear the same retread garbage that we've heard before, and we're stuck. I mean, I'm interested in knowing what the interest level is out there, and then using that to make a decision. None of this means I'm interested in hearing from anybody in person. I just want that information, and then I want to have that discussion again. But
yeah, if I could, I feel like I don't see that the option for us to develop this ourselves is off the table at all. I think we want to look and see what we get from this exercise or this process. And if it doesn't look like it's anything that really blows us away, well, then we go back and look at what we can do ourselves. My concern with putting a value on it or going in, if we say we want to see proposals and you've got to at least be able to return this to us, is that anyone that crosses that bar, I think we have sort of a moral obligation to go with them, and I don't want to be in that position. I think this is a good way for us to look at what the potential of this property could be in the eyes of others, in the eyes of developers. But if we don't think that it clears the bar that we think it should have, then we can make that determination at the time.
Well, Dave, I just didn't want to get too far down that road, as far as a ground lease, and it only generates, a couple $1,000s a month. That's not going to help us dig us out of where we're at. And
No, and I agree. And if that's all we get out of this, I'd say forget it.
Well, that's why I want to have that executive session.
It didn't tickle our fancy, and we're going to move on to do something else. Yeah.
Right, but I'd like to have that executive session with Fred to sit down and say, hey, I penciled this out, and this is the best case scenario per square foot, worst case scenario. That gives me a threshold of put my mind around it that, hey, this is a good investment. This is a long-term investment. But if it's only going to be $2,000 a month, that ain't going to help me at all. It ain't going to help the port at all. That's not what we're looking for here.
Could I just interject and say that the idea of an RFI is simply to determine the level of interest. It's not an RFQ, it's not an RFP, it's not negotiations. It's simply to test the market, which is a fundamental question that the commission has asked for quite a while. And there is clear language that says the commission can reject everything, can say thank you and not proceed with anything. It's simply a test of the market.
Mike, I understand that totally, but I got to agree with Commissioner Shepard that we don't want to get in the pigeonhole. We don't want to get the public thinking that we're ground leasing this and that's our only option. And that's we're going after that because I don't know if that's the right way because I don't have no numbers in front of me. And that's not how I do business. And it appears that talking to staff and everything else, that was kind of the direction everybody's going, is just a ground lease. Nothing was said, Mike, tonight about the port development except when I mentioned it. It's like it's not existent. It's like it doesn't exist. Well, damn it, we're very competent. We got great staff. We got capital. There's opportunity there. And I don't want that to be lost at this point.
I understand completely. I will only say that based on the last discussion with the commission had about what our capacity is for debt and what those projects are that we think we can carry out, there's a very limited amount of debt capacity we have to work with. We have all identified what that number is, and it's about $6.5 million. And so we can clearly keep options open. The commission has the absolute authority to do that after testing the market, but I will remind the commission that we do not have the capacity, the debt capacity to take on large private or private-esque projects easily. We will have to not do something else.
If I could, I remember when we did our fall planning session that the direction to do this request for proposals essentially was part of what we as a commission directed staff to do. Now, we had a lot of discussion about it, and I don't think it was unanimous, but those projects, the $6.5 million of investment, capital investment that we were looking at, and putting out this property, the Barman property, for proposals, what we directed staff to do 3 months ago, whenever it was, and we had that meeting. So this is it.
So Michael, I read through the RFI and so is this asking for, here's a company that wants to come in, they want to put up the capital to build the building and they will just pay us a rent check every month? Or does this RFI open us up to, we want to work together, kind of like presentations that have previously been given to us, where there is a partnership and there's a mutually beneficial profit for each entity? Does this allow for a more creative thing like that? Or is this straight up, we want to come in, we want to build XYZ, and we will pay you XYZ a month?
It leaves every possibility open. The
Okay,
one
perfect.
point I tried to make in here through saying ground lease, maybe that's the wrong term, is don't expect to come in and just buy this property and take it away. Because I thought that was a clear direction from the commission. We don't want to just sell this thing and get out. We want to look at P3 or creative public-private partnership opportunities for this particular commercially zoned property.
Yeah, if I could weigh in, I agree with what Michael just said, and I think the strongest voices to say we're not going to sell Riverside property ever have been Commissioner Shepard and Strike. And I fully agree. If we don't have to sell Riverside property, I mean, I don't know why we would. This is Riverside property, so we're not willing to sell it, absent some very compelling circumstance. And when it comes to ground lease, I know that it's only when you get to the really, really valuable, really small stuff that ground lease starts to look good to people or to the owners. But you can look at a McDonald's in the parking lot of a Home Depot. Those ground leases can be $100,000 a year for the footprint of the building. So it doesn't have to just be $2,000, but we don't know. It's got to be really, really. New York City also gets really good ground leases. Are we New York City? No, but we could ask the market to find out who we are.
But John, to address your comment, we do sell property south of Portway, and we have. So your statement's not true, John. We do sell it.
I thought that's why we decided not to do it anymore, because we were unsatisfied with that.
I don't think that's ever been. We have a policy that anything north of Portway, we're not selling. We actually have a port policy. We don't have anything south of Portway. We may have a conversation at a board meeting, but we don't have any policy. So to say we just sold the Expo Center, that's south of Portway. So you can't say that we don't sell it no more. That's still an option.
Could I just make a brief semantic point? It may be incorrect to say ground lease in here. The idea was that our equity contribution is the land, and it's a significant and imperative component piece of the deal. So we would expect to have a return on equity consistent with that contribution. A ground lease is one way of saying it, but it's only one possible iteration of this. It's equity. It is value that is contributed by a public entity that has a benefit to the deal, and it deserves an equity level of return.
Can I offer maybe a compromise here?
Sure.
Why don't we get this information? Allow Michael to put this out. Allow Michael to get the information. Perhaps change, like you said, that ground lease term to a more partnership opportunity, whatever you think to make it broader. Get that information and then bring it back to the commission at the April 15th or May 15th date, whatever Michael thinks is appropriate. Bring that to us, not bring us a request to meet with someone at that time. That's not what I mean at all, but bring us that information. Here's what we got. Here are the types of individuals, businesses that expressed interest, 1, 2, 10, 0, who knows. And then we incorporate that with the other options that are on the table. Some of which I've heard from Commissioner Strike that specifically have not included incurring debt, and see what we think works best. Then we'll know what's out there and then we can compare it to what we think we can do and have that discussion at that time.
Agreed.
Fully agree.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, I agree too. I just don't want to be put in the corner. I want to be very, very clear, staff to understand that this board is not saying we're going ground lease. We want it left open. We want all our options. We don't want to project that to the public. We want to waste their time. They're going to do an RFP and RFQ, spend a lot of money on that, send reps down, have times, meeting, lunches, everything else. they're going to want some type of answer. And I don't want to be put in that corner. This is too valuable a piece of property. The potential is unbelievable, but that's for another conversation. But I'm fine to move forward right now, but let's make sure we're not obligated.
Okay, that's very clear.
Understood.
Just real quick, before we move on, since these were not formal actions with votes, I just want to restate the consensus for the minutes and have you confirm. So we have consensus to invite Mr. Mike Fox to give a presentation related to bridge replacement at the January 26th meeting. We have consensus to proceed with the RFQ for the FBO services as written. We have consensus to issue the RFDI with changes to the ground lease language to result in a staff summary report to be given to, of the responses to be given to the commission after April 15th.
Chapman consents. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Everett, Everett agrees.
Strike consent.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. The executive director report.
Oh, thanks. This will be really quick. You have a pretty extensive report here with a lot of detail. I'm just going to highlight dates right now and make sure that commissioners are plugged into them. So, as we said, next January 26th, one meeting in February, the 16th. That can be on the 9th. It can be on the 16th. 16th seems a little better. It's pushing it out a further week from the 26th meeting. So I'll just stop me if you look at your calendar and one or more of these dates doesn't work. Fred put a outline together of the budget preparation schedule. So tentatively spring planning, of course, April 6th. This is the attachment to my report. Budget committee May 4th, and the budget hearing June 1st. The first two of those are the most important to confirm that commissioners are available. Spring planning and budget committee, about a month apart.
I'm sorry, Michael, you cut out just a little bit. What were the April the 6th was spring planning?
April 6th, spring planning, that would be a noon meeting with virtual lunch. We're going to save some money and serve that up. And budget committee on the May 4th.
May the 4th. What time is the budget meeting at?
The budget committee meeting would, Fred, remind me, do you want to have that at 5 or a noonish meeting?
No, I think we've done both the planning and the budget committee right after lunch or right around lunchtime.
Commissioner Shepard, is that a problem for you? Or Commissioner Chapman?
Are we going to run standard meetings right after those as well?
Yes, although we'd try to make them very short.
Right now, they look
I
fine.
can figure it out.
Commissioner Shepard, was that a tentative yes?
Yeah, they look fine for me.
Okay. Commissioner Chapman, was that okay?
Yep.
Good. Commissioner Everett.
Commissioner Merriweather, Commissioner Strike? Excellent. Okay, the only other item I want to highlight is that we yesterday received the notice of the 2021 special district election. So any commissioner, any candidate can offer up their interest between February 6th and March 18th. So that's the filing period. Then it closes The election, gosh, I didn't write that down. I think that's about May 18th or so. So I won't put any of the commissioners on the spot right now, but we have three commissioners that their term will be up at the end of June. And it's always important to understand if, when you can, there's no pressure, but when a commissioner was willing to say, gee, I think I'm going to run or not run. So I guess I'll leave it at that. But this is one of those every few years where 3 positions potentially could be open depending on what commissioners decide. So there's a reminder of that. I will send you a document from the county that has links to various documents. There is, of course, a filing fee and such. And then this is something that we will post on our website to make sure the public is aware that there is an election coming up as well. And I'm going to close there. A lot of other detail, a lot of really good work going on to start off the first of the year. This was, I think, I can count on my hand maybe the number of meetings we've had where there's no action items. Believe me, there's a lot of action going on. And we'll bring you, guarantee you, a dozen or so action items at the next couple meetings. So,
Can hardly wait. Okay, any questions for Michael on the report? In the commissioner committee reports, I do want to hit on bridge replacement because in the bi-state work group, the Lowell Clary, let's say there's been strong sentiment on the part of both Kate and Rich McBride, which is the city of Hood River and the county of Hood River, to investigate P3 delivery methods for replacement of the bridge. Lowell Clary was the response of the bi-state working group to give us a kind of highlight of what P3 means, what P3 agreements look like. And after that presentation at the last meeting, Kevin through Lowell, are organizing a industry forum kind of thing where there'll be 2 owners who have had P3 projects and 2 P3 contractors that will give a panel presentation to the bi-state work group. That's going to be February 5th at 1 p.m. And I would strongly urge all of Port of Hood River commissioners to zoom into that and get that exposure to the P3 world, particularly because if we aren't successful in creating a bi-state authority, then the Port of Hood River is the only entity with legislative authority to enter a P3 agreement for a replacement bridge.
Could staff please send us the information about that Zoom?
Absolutely. Yep.
Thank you.
The commission needs to be careful that this doesn't turn into a public meeting with a quorum.
Can they just attend in the audience?
Public meeting is when there's discussion with regard to a matter, and would include a matter like this that could lead to a decision later. So there is a potential problem here with having 3 or more commissioners attend.
Although if you would like to make it a public meeting, we have time to provide sufficient notice, and Kevin and I can work together to enable a live stream and publish the public access to it.
That would take care of the issue.
And Kevin, that would probably mean you reaching out to all the 6 government bodies and saying that I would also recommend that all members of all those bodies actually.
I think there'd be a lot of support for that.
Yeah.
I got really good feedback from Lowell's presentation, so I think it's going to be a good session. I mean, there will be some case studies that will be shared, kind of showing what the key milestones in each of those case studies were, where were those owners at as far as design and financing and everything else when they went out for P3. So absolutely, we can go ahead and do a live stream. I think the information will be really worthwhile for the general public.
So that works, and it's a 3-hour meeting is the schedule, right?
That's the plan.
Okay, so there's that. We have no action items. Any commissioner have an issue they'd like to bring forward? Commission call?
Yes, Commissioner Everett, I'd like to, real quick, I'd like to go back to the flight tracking options and just ask Ann, what is our ultimate quest here, our ultimate goal for the flight tracking?
Well, there's a couple of goals here. It was originally talked about years ago when we were doing our master plan, and that we have no way to track our flights. And when noise issues first started in 2016, we have no way to tell who's flying, where they're flying, how much they're flying, when they're flying, none of that. So really there was just the conversation about tracking has really gained steam with the noise working group and the AAC discussions in the last year to 2 years regarding what ways are available to us to understand who is using our airport and how much, and what sort of actions we can take to work with them in regards to addressing any noise issues that we have.
So the main objective is to get data in regard to our noise situation. Okay.
To get airport operational use data and specific ownership information for specific aircraft.
Okay.
And also in the future for planning efforts, it's really nice to understand how much traffic your airport is getting.
Yeah, and it's accurate data. Yeah, absolutely right, Ann. And the second thing I have, Commissioner Everett, is this is kind of, I've been involved personally with my own business as far as when I'm involved with a business transaction with a second party and it goes south part of the way down, and I'm referring to our property in Odell. But when it went south on me, the party involved negotiating with me owed me some money due to the fact that there was a portion of my time and my attorney and everything else had to be reimbursed. There's some way that we can maybe incorporate this. This is probably a counselor question, but can we incorporate that we get down this path so far and spend all this kind of money that it's another obligation they got to reimburse us for something? You see where I'm getting at, Ann, where I'm coming from? That it just, sorry, we're done doing this. We spent, $40,000 and sorry, we're not going to do it. It just prevents people leading us down a path that it doesn't get completed. And I know it worked well for me because it was an incentive for them and I made money on a deal and it just worked out well.
If I understand it, our last sort of DDA with the Lower Mill, we did install some language like that. If I remember correctly, I'll have to refer back to that document to look at it. With this specific instance, we didn't go through the MOU process. We were directed to go straight to the DDA process. So yeah, we could likely put that into a DDA or even an MOU to kind of cover us before we get to that point, although an MOU is non-binding.
Right. I just like to maybe have some input from the board to see if they're seeing where I'm coming from, because like I said, it seems like we spent a lot of money, and if you can hold somebody a little more committed during the process, they're more apt to finalize and sign the paper than bailing. I have no skin in the game. So anybody else's input at all?
You mean like an earnest money agreement, Hobie? Is that
Well, in my situation, John, there were certain benchmarks that we had to go through for testing on the ground and stuff. And when it got to a certain point, if they were going to bail out, they owed me X amount of dollars. And it was just an incentive that I spent all this money here to do things that they want me to do. Okay, then you're going to move forward. We're going to complete this deal. Or you're going to owe me reimbursement. And I just think it's a great format. It just keeps the interested party interested. Just throwing it out there.
I agree.
And we did that with exit 62. And we paid for the due diligence time and using up the whatever. We made a payment.
Yeah, I don't have any problem with it.
Yeah.
I don't have any problem with it at all. Part of me wants to think, well, that's our job, is to help as much as we can, but we're also using our constituents' money to do so. So I would agree that that's a good idea.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Commissioner Strike. Good idea.
Okay, so that's actually what informs negotiations moving forward for, because it's not in the agreement for the Odell property.
I think there is some language about that. I'll double check and
Right.
a follow up.
Sorry, you said that. Okay, anything else?
That's all I have, John. Thank you.
We don't have an executive session tonight. So
That's correct.
in that case, we're adjourned.
Thank you,
Right.
everyone, and Happy New Year.
Bye.
That may be a record. Congratulations.
Great.